She was lame, lost, and ready to die. But the cowboy with his children in the cabin gave her a reason to live. The blizzard came without warning. It swept down from the northern ridge like a living thing, howling, clawing, erasing every mark of life from the Montana Trail. Evelyn Grace pushed forward through the storm. Her shawl whipped to ribbons, her limp worsening with every painful step. Her breath came in short, ragged bursts. Each exhale froze against her scarf before the wind tore it away. She was lost. Completely and utterly lost. Hours ago, maybe days, she'd been with a few survivors from the wrecked train that had derailed in the mountain pass. She'd wandered from the group, foolishly thinking she could find help. Now there was nothing, only snow, wind, and the faint memory of warmth. Her right leg dragged behind her, the leg that never healed right after the accident back east. It was the reason her fiancé had left her, the reason she lost her teaching job. The reason she boarded that train to start over in the first place. Now it was the reason she could barely walk. The pain was dull at first, then sharp, like knives cutting through her boot. She stopped, leaning against a pine, her whole body shaking. She tried to pray, but her lips were too cold to form words. In the gray blur of the storm, she thought she saw something move, perhaps a trick of her imagination. A shadow? A light? She blinked hard, trying to see through the curtain of white. There was again a faint glow in the distance, a small, flickering light. Could it be a house? A campfire? Or just a cruel illusion of the snow? With nothing left to lose, she began crawling toward it. Her legs gave out after the first few steps. She fell forward into the snow, gasping. Her fingers were blue, her hair crusted with ice. Every part of her screamed to stop. Just lie down, Evelyn. Rest. Her thoughts drifted to her mother's voice, soft and kind. You were meant to teach, not to die in the cold, my dear. Evelyn let out a trembling laugh that turned into a sob. I'm sorry, Mama. I tried. Then the wind changed. The smell of smoke filled her nose, real smoke. And with it, the faint sound of children's laughter carried on the breeze. She forced her body forward, crawling, dragging herself inch by inch until her numb fingers struck wood. It was a door. She pounded weakly, her voice a whisper. Help, please. Inside, a boy's startled voice broke the quiet. Pa! Someone's outside. The door creaked open. A burst of warm air hit her face, carrying with it the smell of stew and firewood. A tall figure filled the doorway, broad-shouldered, wearing a flannel shirt and a worn hat. A rifle leaned by the wall behind him. His eyes widened at the sight before him. Dear Lord, he muttered, kneeling. Sam, grab a blanket. Quick. The man scooped her up like she weighed nothing. She felt the roughness of his coat, heard the crackle of fire as he carried her inside. A little girl gasped and ran to fetch water. Pa! Is she going to die? The boy asked. Not if I can help it, the man said, his voice calm but firm. He set her near the hearth, wrapped her in a wool blanket, and brushed the snow from her face. Evelyn's eyelids fluttered. Her voice came out hoarse. I saw your light. The man looked down at her, at the woman who'd nearly frozen to death on his doorstep, and said softly, You made it just in time, ma'am. You're safe now. Her tears froze against her cheeks as she whispered, Thank you, before her body finally gave in to the exhaustion. As her consciousness faded, she heard one last thing, a little girl's voice beside her ear, gentle and curious. Pa, do you think she's an angel? The cowboy chuckled quietly. No, Abby, just someone God sent our way tonight. The storm raged on outside, but inside that cabin, a spark of life had been lit, a spark that neither Evelyn nor the cowboy knew would change all their lives forever. The scent of wood smoke and venison stew lingered in the small cabin. A soft light flickered from the hearth, painting the walls gold. Outside, the storm still raged, but inside there was a fragile calm. Evelyn stirred beneath a pile of wool blankets. Her body ached, her lips cracked, her leg throbbing with dull, pulsing pain. For a long moment, she didn't remember where she was. All she could hear was the steady crackle of fire and the sound of voices, gentle ones. Pa! She moved! a child whispered, the voice full of wonder. "Let her rest, Abby." Came a deeper tone, steady, grounded, protective. "She's been through hell." Evelyn blinked her eyes open. Everything was blurry at first. The shadows, the flicker of orange light, the faces leaning over her. She saw a little girl with flaxen hair and bright blue eyes, no older than 7. Beside her stood a boy with dark curls, maybe 10, clutching a blanket like it was armor. And near the fire sat him, the man who had opened the door. He was tall, built like someone who'd known hard work all his life. His flannel shirt was rolled at the sleeves, showing arms roughened by years of ranching. His jaw carried a faint stubble, and his brown eyes, though serious, held a quiet warmth. "You're awake," he said softly. "You're safe now, ma'am. We found you at the door last night." His voice had a calm authority to it, the kind that could silence a storm. Evelyn tried to speak, but her throat was dry. He handed her a tin cup of water, helping her sit up. "Drink slow," he murmured. The water tasted like mercy. Where am I?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "You're at my cabin," he said. "Name's Elias Turner. These are my children, Sam and Abby." The boy nodded shyly, and the little girl smiled, clutching the hem of her father's coat. Evelyn looked around. The cabin was modest but warm. A small table by the window, 2 beds in the corner, shelves lined with jars of preserves. The smell of wood and earth filled the air. It felt safe. "How long have I been here?" she asked. "Since last night," Elias said. "You were near frozen solid when we found you. I wasn't sure you'd make it through the night." Her eyes felt her leg, wrapped carefully in strips of cloth. "You tended to me?" He nodded once. "Couldn't just let you die out there. Not with my kids watching. Would have haunted us all." The way he said it, simple, matter of fact, made something ache deep in her chest. No one had cared for her since before she left home. Not like this. Abby stepped closer, holding a steaming bowl. "Papa said you need to eat, miss." Evelyn smiled weakly. "Thank you, sweetheart." The stew smelled of venison and potatoes, seasoned with wild herbs. It was humble fare, but to Evelyn it tasted like heaven. As she ate, Elias spoke again, quiet but curious. "You got a name?" "Evelyn Grace," she answered softly. "I was on the train, the one that derailed outside Helena." Elias's brow furrowed. "Heard about that. Not many survived." "I suppose I did, though I'm not sure why." The cabin went still for a moment. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Elias leaned back in his chair, watching her over the rim of his coffee cup. "You believe in reason, Miss Grace?" She hesitated. "I used to, before my life fell apart." He nodded slowly, as if he understood more than he said. "Sometimes reason don't show itself till long after the storm's gone." The children began clearing the bowls. Abby tugged Evelyn's blanket closer around her shoulders before skipping off to the corner to play with a wooden doll. Evelyn's gaze followed her, softening. "She's precious." Elias smiled faintly. "She's her mother's light. Lost her 2 winters ago. Fever took her." A silence settled, the kind that carries respect rather than pity. Evelyn looked into the fire, whispering, "I'm sorry." "Don't be," Elias said. "Life takes, but sometimes it gives too." Outside, the wind began to ease, the worst of the storm passing. Inside, Evelyn felt warmth creeping back, not just into her fingers and toes, but into the hollow place inside her chest that had been empty for too long. As night fell again, the children said their prayers by the hearth. Evelyn listened quietly as they whispered, "Dear God, please help a lady feel better. Amen." She blinked back tears she didn't want anyone to see. From across the room, Elias spoke softly, his deep voice carrying to the firelight. "You can sleep easy tonight, Miss Grace. You're safe here." And for the first time in months, Evelyn believed it. Her eyes closed, her body sinking into blanket, the sound of rain and wind fading into peace. When she drifted into sleep, she thought she heard Elias's voice again, quiet, almost himself. Sometimes the Lord sends the lost ones to remind the rest of us we're still living. Outside, the blizzard gave way to a clear sky. and the stars glimmered like a promise. When Evelyn woke the next morning, the storm had passed. The sunlight crept timidly through the frosted window pane, spilling gold over the cabin floor. It felt strange to see light again, real light, not the pale blur of a dying mind. For a long time, she simply lay there, wrapped in wool blankets, listening to the gentle rhythm of life inside the cabin. The fire crackled softly. A pot simmered. Outside, she could hear the rhythmic chop of an axe and the distant laughter of children. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. She had grown used to silence, to the kind that came with loneliness. When the door creaked open, cold air rushed in, followed by Elias Turner, hat dusted with snow, axe slung over one shoulder. He set the wood by the stove and glanced toward her with that same calm, steady expression. "Morning," he said simply. Evelyn tried to sit up, wincing. "I should be helping." "You should be resting," he cut in, setting the kettle to boil. "Ain't no shame in letting folks lend a hand." That word, shame, caught her, because that was exactly what she felt. She shouldn't be here. She shouldn't be depending on this man or his children. She'd been a burden all her life since the accident, and she wouldn't start again. When the children ran inside, cheeks pink from the cold, Abby went straight to Evelyn's side. "Papa said I could bring you flowers," she chirped, holding out a few dried wildflowers from last summer. "They're not fresh, but they're still pretty." Evelyn smiled softly, her voice trembling. "They're beautiful, sweetheart." Sam grinned from behind his sister. "Pa says you used to be a teacher. Is that true?" Her brows lifted slightly. "It is. How did you?" "Abby said you talk proper." Elias chuckled from the stove. "Smart boy, that one. Don't miss much." Evelyn felt warmth creep into her chest. She hadn't been spoken to like this, kindly, casually, in so long that it almost hurt. When she was finally able to stand, using the wall for balance, Elias handed her a carved stick. "Sam made it for you," he said. "Ain't fancy, but it'll do." The boy blushed. "So you don't fall again, ma'am." Evelyn gripped the walking stick, her throat tight. "Thank you, Sam." That afternoon, she took her first steps outside. The snow was melting into patches, the sky stretching wide and blue. The world smelled clean, pine and smoke and hope. She sat on a stump near the cabin, watching the children feed the chickens. For the first time in months, she felt the sun on her face and didn't wish for death. That evening, as the fire glowed low, she tried to tell Elias she would leave in the morning. "I've already taken too much from you," she said softly, hands trembling around her cup. "You've got your children to think about. I'll find my way to town once I'm strong enough." Elias didn't look up from the wood. He was whittling. "Can you walk 5 miles to that forest alone?" "I'll manage." He looked at her, then really looked, and the quiet weight of his gaze pinned her words. "Miss Grace, you got frostbite scars, a limp, and a stubborn streak. You ain't going anywhere till that leg's healed proper. And even then, maybe don't be so quick to leave folks who care." She blinked, unsure what to say. Care? She'd heard pity, duty, even politeness, but not care. "Elias," she said softly, "you don't even know me." He smiled faintly, his eyes reflecting the firelight. Sometimes you don't need to know a person's story to see the hurt they carry. Silence filled the room, not awkward but tender. The kind of silence that warmed more than a fire. Days became weeks. Evelyn grew stronger. She began teaching the children again, reading aloud, showing them how to write letters with a bit of charcoal on birch bark. Abby would sit by her knee, giggling when she got a word wrong, and Sam, serious as his father, would correct her. Elias watched from the porch, arms folded, a quiet smile tugging at his lips. The sound of laughter in his home was something he hadn't heard since his wife's passing. And now it was back, because of this broken woman who'd stumbled into their lives. That night, when Evelyn thanked him again for letting her stay, he shook his head. "You've done more for us than you know," he said. Her voice broke a little. "I've done nothing." He set his hand gently on her shoulder, rough palm warm against the worn fabric of her dress. "You brought my children's laughter back. That's something a man don't forget." She looked up at him, eyes glassy with unshed tears. But before she could answer, Abby called from her cot, "Papa, will Miss Evie say prayers with us tonight?" Elias nodded toward her. "Go on, if you're up to it." Evelyn limped over, sat beside the children, and folded her hands. The moment she began to whisper the prayer, soft and trembling, the cabin seemed to hold its breath. "Dear Lord," she said, "thank you for second chances, even for those of us who thought we didn't deserve them." When she lifted her gaze, Elias was watching her from the firelight. Quiet, thoughtful, his expression unreadable, but she didn't need words. For the first time since the accident, she felt something stirring deep inside her chest, something warm, steady, alive. Maybe it wasn't just her leg that was healing. Maybe her heart was, too. Spring came to mountains like a shy visitor. Snow melted into rushing creeks. The air smelled of pine and damp soil, and the Turner's cabin sat nestled between wildflower fields and tall spruce trees. Inside, laughter had become a part of daily life. Evelyn could walk now, slowly with her carved stick, but she no longer hid her limp. Sam teased her playfully. Abby followed her everywhere, and Elias had begun to smile more than he spoke. The cabin that once felt like a shelter from death had become a home. But peace, as Evelyn learned, never stays untested for long. One afternoon, while Elias was out mending the fence, Evelyn helped the children gather laundry by the creek. The water was icy cold, the sun glimmering across its surface. Abby sang softly while Sam skipped stones. Evelyn smiled, feeling a lightness she hadn't known in years. "Miss Evie," Abby chirped. "Pa says we might go to town next week. He said you can come too." Evelyn laughed softly. "Did he now? I'm not sure I'd be much good in town." "Sure you would." Sam said, tossing another rock into the water. "Pa says folks there don't talk near as nice as you." She was about to answer when the sound of hooves echoed from beyond the ridge. Her head lifted instinctively. Two riders emerged through the trees, coats dusty, hats low, spurs glinting in the sun. Something in their presence made the air shift. Sam's voice faltered. Pa wasn't expecting company. Evelyn's stomach twisted. She didn't know why, but familiar dread crawled up her spine. The men slowed their horses near the fence where Elias worked. One of them, tall with a scar down his cheek, called out, "You Elias Turner?" Elias straightened, rifle slung casually over one shoulder. "Depends who's a skin." The second man dismounted, sneering. "Name's Burke, my partner, and I've been looking for a woman passed through here. Name's Evelyn Grace." The world seemed to stop. Evelyn froze by the creek, her pulse roaring in her ears. "Can't imagine what you want with her," Elias said evenly. "She owes money," Burke said, spitting in the dirt. "Used to teach back east. Invested in a school project. Ran off before paying what she owed. Folks don't forget debts." Elias's grip on his rifle tightened. "You sure it's not the folks who wronged her that did the running?" The scarred man smirked. "You defending her? She's a crippled runaway. Turner, don't tell me you're keeping her here." Elias's jaw flexed. His voice, low and even, carried more weight than shouting ever could. "She's under my roof. That's all you need to know." The air between them crackled. The two men exchanged a look, then swung back into their saddles. Burke smirked. "You'll regret tucking strays. They got a way of bringing trouble with them." And with that, they rode off, dust rising behind them like ghosts fading into the hills. Evelyn stood frozen at the edge of the trees. She hadn't realized she was trembling until Abby's small hand slipped into hers. "Miss Evie, you look scared." She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm all right, sweetheart. Go inside with your brother, will you?" When Elias returned to the cabin, she was sitting by the window, staring out at the fading light. Her face was pale. "They found me," she whispered before he could speak. "Those men, they know who I am." He set his rifle aside, removing his hat. "They won't be back." "You don't know that." She turned toward him, tears brimming. "You don't understand. Elias, they're right. I did owe money. I borrowed from the school to pay for my train west after I lost everything. I never meant to steal, but—" her voice broke. "I was desperate." He didn't interrupt. He just listened, his steady eyes fixed on hers. When she finished, silence fell between them. The fire popped softly. "Do you hate me now?" she whispered. Elias stepped forward, the floor creaking under his boots. He shook his head slowly. "Hate you? No, ma'am. You made a mistake trying to survive. There's not a soul alive who ain't done the same. But I brought danger to your door," she said, voice trembling. "To your children." He reached down, lifting her chin until her eyes met his. "You didn't bring danger, Evelyn. You brought life back into this house. Before you came, it was just wood and silence. Now my kids laugh again. Don't you dare call that trouble." Her lips parted, but no words came. For a long time, they stood there, firelight between them, storm outside building again. Then he said quietly, "Let 'em come if they will. Ain't no man talking summoned from my home who don't want to go." She turned away, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Elias, I'm not worth all this." His answer was simple, steady, and certain. "You are to us." That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. Every creak of the wood, every howl of the wind made her heart pound. But when she peeked from her room, she saw Elias sitting by the window, rifle across his lap, watching the tree line. He was protecting her, protecting them. She pressed a hand to her chest, whispering into the dark, "Lord, I don't know what I've done to deserve this man, but please don't let him pay the price for me." Outside, thunder rolled over the mountains. Inside, by the glow of a dying fire, Evelyn Gray sat awake, half terrified, half in awe, realizing she was no longer just a guest in this cabin. She was part of it, and for the first time since the world broke her, she didn't want to run anymore. The days that followed were quiet. The riders never returned, though the memory of them lingered like a shadow at the edge of Evelyn's peace. But spring had come to the mountain valley in full bloom, and with it came a softness that settled over the Turner's land. The snow melted into ribbons of water that cut through the meadows. Wildflowers climbed up the hillside, and the air smelled of pine sap and wet soil. Evelyn found strength returning to her legs, and with it, a kind of joy she hadn't known in years. Each morning, she rose before dawn to help Elias with chores. At first, he protested. "You ain't near ready to be hauling firewood," he said one morning, handing her a mug of coffee. "And you ain't near as stubborn as you think, Mr. Turner," she replied with a faint smile. He laughed softly, a sound she hadn't heard often enough. So they worked together, him splitting logs with steady swings of the axe, her gathering kindling and feeding the chickens while the sun spilled light across the valley. The children's laughter drifted through the air, and for the first time, Evelyn began to hum while she worked, an old hymn she used to sing in her classroom. When Elias looked up, sweat glinting on his brow, he found himself smiling at the sound. Later he told her, "That's a mighty fine voice you've got." She blushed faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Used to sing for the school children back before the accident. What made you stop?" She hesitated. "Didn't feel right singing when the world went quiet inside me." Elias set down his axe and leaned on the handle, eyes thoughtful. "Well," he said slowly, "maybe it's time to let the world hear it again." The days turned to weeks. Evelyn's limp grew lighter. She still carried Sam's carved walking stick, though more out of gratitude than need. She spent her afternoons with Abby, teaching her to read, and evenings with Sam, helping him carve little wooden animals by the fire. Elias often sat at the table, pretending to be busy with repairs, but truthfully, he watched her, the way she smiled when Abby mispronounced a word, the way her eyes softened when Sam made her laugh, the way her presence filled every empty corner of the cabin his late wife had once warmed. He didn't mean for his heart to open again. It just did, quietly, naturally, like spring thawing a frozen stream. One morning, Evelyn walked down to the riverbank alone. The sun had just risen, scattering gold across the water. She could feel the earth firm beneath her feet, her body no longer trembling with weakness. She stood there, leaning on her stick, breathing in the air, alive, whole, grateful. Behind her, boots crunched softly over the grass. Elias, he stopped beside her, folding his arms, watching the river with her. "Kid said you came down here early," he said. "I needed to see the morning," she answered. "Sometimes I still wake up thinking I'm lost out there in the snow." He nodded. "Happens to me, too. Different snow, same kind of loss." They stood in silence, the rush of water filling the space between words. Finally, Elias spoke again. "You ever think maybe the good Lord leads us through the worst just to make sure we're ready to appreciate the rest?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "I used to think he forgot me altogether." Elias's voice was low, almost tender. "Reckon he didn't forget. Reckon he just waited till you were close enough for him to find you." She turned to look at him then, and their eyes met. Two souls who'd known too much pain, too much loss. But standing there, side by side, they saw something new reflected back. Peace. A long, quiet moment passed. Then Abby's voice broke through the stillness. "Pa, Miss Evie." They both turned as a little girl came running down the hill, a basket of wildflowers in her hands. "I picked these for you, Miss Evie." Evelyn bent down, her heart swelling as Abby handed her a bundle of yellow and purple blossoms. "They're lovely, sweetheart." Abby grinned. "You smell nicer than flowers now." "Pa says so." Elias coughed, turning away with a small, embarrassed chuckle. Evelyn hid a smile behind her hand. When Abby skipped off again, Evelyn looked at him with a teasing glint in her eyes. "Did you say that, Mr. Turner?" He met her gaze, voice warm. "Maybe I did." The air seemed to hum between them. Something unspoken but understood. Evelyn looked away, cheeks flushed, her heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. Elias reached down, plucked a single wildflower from her basket, and tucked it behind her ear. His hand brushed her cheek, a brief, gentle touch that lingered longer than it should have. "Spring suits you," he murmured. For a moment, Evelyn forgot every scar, every ache, every shadow of her past. In that single breath of sunlight and stillness, she felt new. That evening, she sang again, really sang. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, Evelyn's voice filled the cabin with a soft, trembling melody. Elias sat by the fire, head bowed, eyes closed, as the children listened in wonder. When she finished, the room was silent for a long heartbeat before Abby whispered, "Mama used to sing like that." Evelyn's throat tightened. She reached out, took Abby's hand, and whispered, "Then maybe she's singing with us tonight." Elias looked up, and in his eyes was something she hadn't seen before, something deep and certain. Hope. Outside, the moon rose over the valley, silvering the roof of the little cabin where laughter had once been a memory. Inside, a woman who wanted to die had begun to live again, and a man who'd sworn to love no one but his late wife felt his heart quietly choose someone new. Neither said the words aloud that night. They didn't have to. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with thunder. It comes like dawn through a half-open door. The first sign came with the wind. It was a hot, restless wind that swept down from the mountains, carrying the smell of smoke. By noon, the sky had turned an odd shade of gold. The chickens were uneasy, the horses snorting and stamping near the fence. Elias stepped outside, eyes narrowing toward the western ridge. A faint column of smoke twisted into the air. Then another. His gut tightened. Lord have mercy. He turned back toward the cabin, voice sharp. "Evelyn. Kids." Evelyn came running from the garden, skirt brushing against her boots. "What is it?" He pointed toward the ridge. "Fire. It's coming fast." Her heart lurched. The valley that had once seemed so wide and safe now looked like a trap. Elias didn't waste a second. "Sam, get the horses. Abby, grab your ma's picture and your little things. Evelyn, pack what food you can carry." His tone left no room for argument. Evelyn hurried inside, heart hammering as she filled a sack with bread, dried meat, and water. Her hands trembled as she looked around the cabin. The home that had healed her, that had given her life again. The walls, the smell of pine, the warmth of laughter, all of it could be gone in minutes. By the time she stepped outside again, the horizon was burning red. The fire had crossed a ridge, roaring like a beast unleashed. Trees snapped and fell, the smoke thickening, the air choking hot. Elias had the horses saddled, Sam clutching the reins of the mare, and Abby already mounted. "Evelyn!" he shouted over the wind. "You take Abby. I'll get Sam and the supplies." She climbed on the mare behind Abby, clutching the child close as Elias lashed the last sack to his saddle. "Go!" he ordered. But Evelyn hesitated. "You're not staying?" He shook his head. "I'm right behind you." They rode hard toward the river, the only path clear of flame. The ground was hot beneath the horses' hooves. Ash rained from the sky. Evelyn coughed, the smoke burning her throat. Behind them, the valley blazed like the end of the world. "Hold on, Abby," she cried, voice cracking. "I am Miss Evie," the little girl shouted, tears streaking her soot-stained face. Elias rode close behind, his jaw set, eyes squinting against the glare. Every muscle in his body was wound tight, not from fear for himself, but for them. They reached the riverbank just as a burning tree crashed behind them. The horses reared, screaming. Evelyn nearly lost her grip, but Elias was there in an instant. He caught her arm, steadying her. "Stay with me," he yelled. They plunged the horses into the river. The cold water hissed against the heat. Flames raged along both sides of the bank, but the river became their salvation, a strip of safety in a world of fire. When they reached the far side, the air was cooler, the wind shifting north. Elias looked back, breath ragged, sweat and soot streaking his face. The cabin, their home, was gone. A sea of fire consumed it. Evelyn's heart broke at the sight. Tears blurred her vision, but she couldn't look away. All that they had built, every sign of peace they'd found, burned to ashes before her eyes. Elias stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. His voice was low, rough with grief. "It's just wood and nails, Evelyn. We're still here. That's what matters." She turned to him, trembling. "But everything—" He lifted her chin gently, eyes fierce and tender all at once. "No, not everything. I've got my kids. And I've got you." The words hung there, heavy with truth. For a heartbeat, the fire roared, the world burned, and still all she could feel was his hand, his voice, his heart. They found shelter in a hollow by the river, where the smoke thinned and stars began to pierce the darkening sky. Evelyn sat beside Abby, wrapping her shawl around the child. Sam dozed against his father's side, exhausted. Elias looked at Evelyn across the small campfire they'd managed to build from unburned branches. His eyes caught the flicker of light, weary, but filled with something unspoken. "You saved my children today," he said quietly. Evelyn shook her head. "We saved each other." He smiled faintly. "Maybe so." A long silence fell between them. Only the crackle of the fire and the whisper of water filled the air. Then Elias said softly, "You know, after my wife died, I didn't think there was another woman alive who could make this place feel like home again." Evelyn's breath caught. He went on, voice rough, honest. "But you did. You walked out of the snow, half dead and full of hurt, and somehow you brought life back to this family. Back to me." Her eyes glistened in the firelight. "I wasn't looking for a home," she whispered, "but I think I found one." Elias reached out, his hand brushing against hers. She didn't pull away. For a long moment, they just sat there, two souls who had lost everything and somehow found each other in the ruins. He whispered, "We'll rebuild, Evelyn, together." And in the faint glow of the fire, she nodded, tears shining on her cheeks. Together, above them, the first light of dawn touched the horizon, soft, pale, full of promise. The world had burned clean. What was left was something new, fragile and real. Love, reborn from ashes. The fire had passed, leaving behind a land scarred and blackened. But from the ashes came silence, a silence not of death, but a beginning. For days, they lived by the riverbank, gathering what little the flames had spared. The air smelled of char and earth. Charred trees stood like dark sentinels against the sky. And yet, when the morning light hit the valley, it gleamed golden again. Elias and Sam worked side by side, clearing the remains of the cabin. Evelyn helped where she could, her limp nearly gone, her hands callous but strong. Abby picked flowers from the unburned edges of the field, placing them in a small tin cup she'd rescued. "Flowers for our new home," she said proudly. Evelyn smiled, setting the cup on a stump like a promise. Every day was hard, rebuilding the fences, raising walls from fresh-cut logs, sleeping beneath the stars when the nights turned cold. But in the hardship, there was laughter again. There were songs by the fire, stories before bed, hope where there had once been despair. And slowly, plank by plank, nail by nail, a cabin rose again in the same spot where the old one had stood. One evening, as the new roof was nearly finished, Elias found Evelyn by the river. She was washing a shirt, her sleeves rolled to the elbows, her hair undone in the breeze. The sunset painted her face in shades of rose and gold. He stood there a long while, just watching her. When she noticed him, she smiled softly. "You're supposed to be up there finishing the roof, Mr. Turner." He chuckled, stepping closer. "Sam's talking over. Boy's near a man now." She wrung out the cloth and set it aside. "He's grown strong, they both have." His eyes lingered on her. They had help. Her breath caught slightly, sensing something in his tone. He hesitated, then said quietly, "You remember that night in the fire when I said we'd rebuild together?" "I do," she whispered. Well, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, a simple ring, carved from polished wood. "Seems to me we've done the rebuilding part." Evelyn stared at it, her eyes wide, her hand trembling slightly. "Elias," he stepped closer, his voice rough but steady. "I ain't got gold or fine words, but I've got a heart that's been healed by you. I've got 2 children who already call you theirs in every way that counts. And I reckon what I'm trying to say is—" He paused, taking her hand gently. "I don't ever want another sunrise or storm without you by my side. Will you be my wife, Evelyn?" For a moment, the river was the only sound, running calm and clear beside them. Evelyn blinked back tears, her voice breaking as she whispered, "You gave me a reason to live, Elias Turner. And now, you're giving me a reason to stay." She nodded, smiling through her tears. "Yes, I will." Elias exhaled, relief and joy flooding through him. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, made from his hands and his heart. He leaned forward, and their foreheads met, a kiss of peace, of promise, of love that had walked through fire and come out whole. The wedding came quietly beneath the open sky. Sam stood proud beside his father. Abby scattered wildflowers around Evelyn's feet, giggling when the wind caught them. A local preacher from the next valley read the vows. No lace, no finery, just mountain air, bird song, and 2 souls who had already chosen each other long before the words were spoken. When Elias kissed her, the whole valley seemed to breathe again. Seasons passed. Grass grew where the fire had once burned. Wildflowers covered the hills again, brighter than before. The new cabin stood strong, its chimney smoking softly in the mornings. Evelyn's laughter filled it, mingling with the sound of Abby's chatter and Sam's steady hammering outside. Sometimes, in the evenings, Elias would sit by the fire and watch her read aloud, her voice gentle, her smile lit by firelight. He would think of that night when he found her, broken, frozen, ready to die, and how, somehow, God had sent her straight to his door. One twilight, Evelyn stepped out onto the porch, the air cool and sweet after rain. She looked out over the land, the rebuilt fences, the grazing horses, the mountains standing proud against the fading light. Elias joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Still think about the fire?" he asked softly. She leaned against him. "Sometimes, but mostly, I think about how it gave us a new beginning." He kissed the top of her head. "You were my second chance, Evelyn." "And you were mine," she whispered. They stood there together, the sunset washing the world in gold. Behind them, laughter spilled from the cabin, the sound of home. From the ashes of loss, they had built love. From brokenness, they had found family. And though neither had planned for it, both knew now. Sometimes the reason to live isn't found in surviving. It's found in belonging.